top of the Democratic ticket has breathed new life into the presidential campaign. And Democrats hope it is also helping their chances down ballot. The Senate Democrats' campaign arm is unleashing a $79 million ad blitz across 4 battleground states, hitting Republicans in Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and in Michigan. Here's a look at some of those ads.
Mike Rogers took millions from Big Pharma and Wall Street in Congress and voted their way, then went to work for companies helping Chinese and Saudi businesses, while Michiganders lost jobs overseas.
Dave McCormick said he'd be very, very happy to see our reproductive rights taken away.
McCormick wants to outlaw abortions.
And said he was against exceptions, even in cases of rape or incest.
It is not just the U.S. Senate. Democrats are also working to flip the majority in the House. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Joe Neguse from Colorado. He's the House Assistant Minority Leader and serves on the Judiciary Committee.
Good morning, Congressman. So a little busy, are we?
Good morning. Good to see you. Very busy.
I know. Look, I think people sort of look at these House and Senate races as really the same race, but they really aren't. A statewide race is very different from a congressional race. And the fact that the Democrats have been able to manage that split screen where they're now in a position, it looks like, to be not just competitive, but hold the Senate along certain grounds. Now, things still have to fall in place with some of the candidates, for sure. But how are you feeling looking at the situation right now between the House and Senate efforts to level up the game for the Democrats to not only hold the House, take the House back, but hold the Senate?
Well, good morning and good to be with you. I'm feeling very optimistic about the road ahead. As you said, Michael, at the end of the day, every race is different and unique, of course, and dependent on a particular candidate's record and vision for the country. But, of course, we're all undergirded by our shared values. And in that sense, I couldn't be more optimistic and hopeful about our ability to ultimately win on November 5th, to win a majority in the House of Representatives, to make Leader Jeffries Speaker Jeffries come January 3rd, and, of course, to elect Vice President Harris as the 47th President of the United States. And you see, of course, that potential outcome in sight in terms of the empirical data, the polling that is now trending in our direction. And I think that's a reflection of the very optimistic and hopeful vision that Vice President Harris has articulated to the country over these last few weeks. At the end of the day, you know this, of course, Alicia knows this as well, elections are invariably about the future, not about the past. And so, the voters are going to have a choice to make between two very different visions for the future. The vision that Vice President Harris has articulated for the country, that, as I said, is hopeful and optimistic about our ability to address consequential challenges, and then a very dark and divisive vision that former President Trump has, of course, articulated, perhaps best reflected in his Project 2025 plans. So I'm optimistic, as I said, about the road ahead and our ability to win on November 5th.
And even as you set that frame, Congressman, the past versus the future, it is interesting to me that you have the ex-president wanting to drag the past out into the light. Here he is at a presser, what I would call a wacky and dangerous presser at Palm Beach. I want you to take a listen to what he had to say about January 6th.
If you look at January 6th, which a lot of people aren't talking about very much, I think those people were treated very harshly. When you compare them to other things that took place in this country where a lot of people were killed, nobody was killed on January 6th. But I think that the people of January 6th were treated very unfairly.
Okay, so let's just roll through that as a fact check. One, this idea that a lot of people aren't talking about January 6th. It is at the core of this very race. I think there's a concern that there's still a permission structure in place for this to happen again. Again, this idea that nobody was killed on January 6th, also untrue. And then what I think is perhaps arguably among the most alarming things, the fact this is the people of January 6th were treated very unfairly. What does all of that tell you about what Donald Trump imagines, both if he were to win and if he were to lose?
Well, it tells me a few things, Alicia. First and foremost, that he is, as he has been, myopically focused on the past and on retribution. And, of course, as you know, I served as an impeachment manager in the months following January 6th and the impeachment trial that followed. I was there on January 6th on the House floor. I think that the American people clearly disagree with his rendition and his characterization of what happened on that day when we came dangerously close to ultimately a subversion of the peaceful transfer of power. And, of course, I share the concerns that many have articulated about his willingness to engage in the same type of conduct that he did 4 years ago. But look, at the end of the day, what I would just say, Alicia, is I think the American people have grown tired of his rhetoric and ultimately of a party in his party that's bereft of any ideas to make people's lives better, to address the challenges that they're facing in their everyday lives. And that's ultimately what this election will be about. Do we want to have Vice President Harris become president so that she can lower costs for the American people and grow the middle class and protect our fundamental freedoms? Or do the American people want a former president who, as we know, ultimately attempted to subvert the peaceful transfer of power just 4 years ago? I think the American people will choose the former and that ultimately will elect the House Democratic majority to govern with her in partnership next year.
Well, you're in seemingly in a good position, Congressman, to get there in that regard, because you've got the Cook Political Report putting out on Thursday, 3 battleground states that were once leaning Republican now are toss-ups: Arizona, Georgia, Nevada. This speaks to the competitive nature that this campaign for the presidency has become and the impact it's having down ballot. Part of that also are narratives around ticket splitters, for people who may vote for, Kamala Harris for president and, maybe a different candidate down ballot. How are Democrats assessing that aspect of this campaign as well, trying to hold their vote together so that, to our earlier point of the conversation, you can take advantage in battleground states like Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, where you're winning the U.S. Senate seats, for example, and the presidency?
Well, I would say a couple of things, Michael. First and foremost, I think that Vice President Harris and Coach Waltz are generating a level of enthusiasm and excitement amongst all Americans, but in particular, of course, folks within the Democratic Party, but independents as well, and some Republicans, that we haven't really seen for the better part of the last decade and a half. And that is going to inure to the benefit of not just, of course, electing them as president and vice president, but ultimately electing House Democrats and Senate Democrats up and down the ballot. It's why you saw, for example, the successful rally that Vice President Harris held in Wisconsin just a few short days ago with Tammy Baldwin, of course, one of our great U.S. senators who's up for re-election in that battleground state. The same could be said, of course, in Michigan, in Arizona just last night. But I would also say that, I agree with one of the guests that you had on previously about ultimately elections being around policy and the need for us to articulate a policy-focused vision for the future. The policies that Vice President Harris is talking about on the campaign trail, the child tax credit, ultimately protecting freedoms, including reproductive health care, those are immensely popular with the American people. And it's why I think you're seeing the outpouring of support across the board, and why I think this ticket and House Democrats will be successful in rural America, in urban America, and everywhere in between, including here in Colorado, by the way.
So interesting, Michael, right? Especially as we see that emphasis in the last few days on the Mountain West. We, of course, saw that swing through the Midwest. But all of a sudden, that area, I know Colorado was not in question, but Nevada, there was a point where the Trump campaign was saying, they're done. We've won Nevada. Right. Don't even think about Nevada. They shouldn't put money into Nevada. Arizona, as always, is going to come down to the turnout, to Election Day itself. But this map, Congressman, and Michael, the map has changed.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Congressman, speak to that, because Georgia is a swing state, arguably. What say you, sir? Are we missing something here, or is this map really changing in a dynamic way for Democrats?
I think you're right. I think the map is expanding. Of course, the Sun Belt states, Arizona, Nevada, very similar demographically to Colorado. We've got incredible, talented, exceptional candidates running in those states in terms of the House and, of course, the Senate as well. And I think the vice president, again, immensely popular in those states as well as Georgia. Of course, Georgia has 2 Democratic U.S. senators that we elected not too long ago. So it's a state that we should be able to compete in. And ultimately, I think that we're going to win. Again, we can't be complacent. There's about 85 days left. So a lot of time left for us to ensure that we get the vote out, and we intend to do just that.